to welcome everyone back to our investigation into Mystery Babylon the Great. My name is Don Sherrod, and I will continue to be your host as we go through this six-part series of our study. And this is Mystery Babylon the Great, Part 4. And the overall thrust of Part 4 is going to be to go through an identification process, and we're going to unveil who we think Mystery Babylon the Great possibly is. And so anyway, it's also going to kind of be an elimination process as well. So anyway, let's move forward here. All right, before we continue, I want to go ahead and talk about a couple of things that we went over in Part 1 and then Part 2 and Part 3. And this is the prophetic profile that we developed on Mystery Babylon the Great from Part 1. And anyway, just to quickly look over this is about her judgment. She is very wealthy. She mingles with the kings of the earth, and this mingling produces a wine that makes its way down to the inhabitants of the earth. It appears she has some kind of worldwide connection, with the kings of the earth and the inhabitants of the earth and all of that. She has some kind of global influence because she's sitting on many waters, which those waters we find out later on in that chapter are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. And she is identified by a city or by one of her cities. I believe that there's many cities there, but there's one in particular that when you say the name of that city, it pretty much spells out exactly who it is. And she is drunk with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And those are some details we found out about her in Part 1. So this slide here is from Part 2 and Part 3, and we went through that, and this is, of course, the beast with the 7 heads and the 10 horns. And so, there's a lot of supporting information in Part 2 and Part 3 and how we arrived to our conclusions here. But anyway, Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, Rome, Antichrist Empire, or the feet and toes that are part iron, part clay from Daniel's chapter 2. Also, we could just call it the last Gentile world empire. But anyway, all of those right there are the names of the 7 heads. And then we had this mysterious one to show up here. This Mystery Babylon the Great turns out to be number 7 and goes right in between there, and when it does, it pushes this one to the number 8 position. Went in a lot of detail about all of that, so if you haven't seen Part 2 and Part 3 for this part, you definitely want to see that first because it gives a lot of supporting information that we presented. Well, anyway, this Mystery Babylon the Great here, and this lineup here, see this lineup here is in Daniel chapter 2, and this lineup is here in Revelation chapter 17 and 18. Okay. The only additional thing is this shows up in chapter 17, but it does not show up in Daniel's chapter 2 in his rendition of all of this, where we get to all these names anyway. So anyway, this one mysteriously shows up in Revelation, and we don't know anything about it until it shows up in Revelation, and John tells us about it. And so that's, the first we hear about it. And that's hundreds of years after Daniel received the interpretation of the dream and everything that Nebuchadnezzar had in Daniel chapter 2. So anyway, this mysterious one, that's the one that's we're going to be looking at today to see if we can find out exactly who that is. And another thing we found out here that I want to point out is that this one goes in right here, and it's real close to the last Gentile world empire. And the reason we know that they're right there together at the end of the age, just before Jesus Christ returns in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, is because this one destroys that one. And so in order for that to happen, they have to be at the end of the age. All right, so as we continue here, what we're going to do is we're going to read the entire chapter 18 of the book of Revelation. But before we do, I want to check out this last verse that was in chapter 17. So this is Revelation chapter 17, verse 18. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. So, and the woman, this Mystery Babylon the Great, aka the great whore, is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. So, anyway, now we're going to read the entire chapter of chapter 18 of the book of Revelation. Let's take a look at that. And after these things, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lighted with his glory. And he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins, and that you receive not of her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works. And the cup which she hath filled, fill to her double. How much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judgeth her. And the kings of the earth, who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her, shall bewail her and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth her merchandise any more. The merchants of gold and silver and precious stones and of pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and all fine wood and all manner of vessels of ivory and all manner of vessels of most precious wood and of brass and iron and marble, and cinnamon and odors and ointments and frankincense and wine and oil and fine flour and wheat and beasts and sheep and horses and chariots and slaves and souls of men. And the fruits that thy soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all things which were dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. The merchants of these things which were made rich by her shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, for in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught. And every shipmaster and all the company and ships and sailors and as many as trade by sea stood afar off, and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like unto this city? And they cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour is she made desolate. Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone, and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. And the voice of harpers and musicians and pipers and trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee, and no craftsman of whatsoever craft he be shall be found any more in thee. And the sound of the millstone shall be heard no more at all in thee, and the light of the candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. Okay, one thing that we need to understand here is that we are talking about commercialism. And there's no question that this commercialism is a huge thing in this chapter, and it is a worldwide thing that's going on. And this is a very important development in our research because there's a lot of wealth expressed here. And commercialism will be an important detail in identifying this Mystery Babylon the Great. Remember, this is about her judgment also. So chapter 18 is talking about commercialism and what that judgment is going to be like for Mystery Babylon the Great. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add a few more details to our prophetic profile that come from chapter 18. And let's talk about those a minute. We got Mystery Babylon the Great has fallen. She is now inhabited by devils. Foul spirits have a hold on her, and she is now infected with hatefulness. She is a commercial powerhouse, and that is the wine. As we go along, I believe that what we're going to see is that when she interacts with the kings of the earth and it creates this wine that makes its way down to the inhabitants of the earth, I'm just going to say it right now, that I believe that that wine is the commercialism. And so, anyway, her judgment will be catastrophic. Part of her commodities include, now listen to this, slavery and the souls of men. And the kings she interacts with are not necessarily all political. See, when I first began to look at this, I began to think, it was all, the political leaders of all these different nations and the political leaders, gathering together and having, making decisions and all that affect, the inhabitants of the earth and all. But I think that there's a dark side of kings also, because there's whatever it is that's going on, God does not like what's going on with Mystery Babylon the Great. And so there's some serious darkness and wickedness that is going on in her. So when you look at some of the dark kinds of things, we're gonna get into that just a little bit. All right. So one of the first things that you're going to run into if you ever study this particular topic, you're going to find out that the Roman Catholic Church is offered up by many scholars as Mystery Babylon the Great. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our prophetic profile here and we're going to apply details from the Roman Catholic Church and her history and so forth and see if it fits within this profile. All right. So of course we're talking about, it's judgment. And so the judgment is going to be catastrophic and all that. But in this next statement here, she is very wealthy. Well, the Roman Catholic Church is extremely wealthy. As a matter of fact, I don't think they know how much wealth they actually have. They probably couldn't tell you if you asked them. But anyway, they mingle some with the kings of the earth. They go around the world and stuff and meet with kings of the earth. They generally, they come forward and they'll have some, statement about a topic or something that they want to present to the world and make it a public thing. They are actually at United Nations meetings. They got their own place there for that. And what has been stated about her is that she is more from an observer status when it comes to those things. But what I see personally from the Mystery Babylon the Great thing is she is a major player, not just an observer. She is a major player within this relationship between her and the kings of the earth. And so, and plus it's, it's more of a worldwide thing. And plus she sits upon many waters and all of that. And so what I'm seeing from Mystery Babylon the Great, to me, she has a little bit greater dealings with these than, say, the Roman Catholic Church does. All right. She does possibly reign over the kings of the earth in a way, as some will tell us, well, it's a religious power that she has. And this religious power, when she mingles with the kings of the earth, makes its way down to the inhabitants of the earth, that, I don't know that I can say that the religious side of what she has going on is enough to make the inhabitants of the earth drunk with all that stuff that she may offer when she does meet with the kings of the earth. So, I don't know, we're starting to get some iffy stuff here. And she can definitely be identified by a city, though. Rome. Rome, is pretty obvious, the city that you would identify the Roman Catholic Church with. But the thing about it is also Rome is a city that they say sits on 7 hills. So some people look at that statement and they go, well, we have the 7 heads here. She sits on 7 hills. It must be Rome. And anyway, 7 hills versus 7 mountains, 7 heads and all that. I don't think, that's the case either. And then Revelation chapter 17, verse 10 says this. It says, she shall continue a short space. You remember we got to Rome was empire number 6. And then it says, after that, another one shall come and shall continue a short space. And that one is Mystery Babylon the Great, number 7. And it says she shall continue a short space. So the problem is the Roman Catholic Church has actually been here for quite a while. So, there are some problems in considering her as Mystery Babylon the Great when you apply all of these details to it. All right. Now, we also need to take a look at some of the details, the new details that we brought into the picture from chapter 18. So, you got a big problem here. Roman Catholic Church is not a commercial entity. And the thing is for the ones that want to advocate for the Roman Catholic Church being Mystery Babylon the Great, what they have to do, this obvious problem that they have, they divide chapter 17 from chapter 18, and they say chapter 17 is about religious Babylon, chapter 18 is about commercial Babylon. So they kind of have to create 2 Babylons to make things work. And so they try to make the case anyway that there's 2 Babylons that are in view. However, this is just me. And I'm going to show you some things and why I say it's just me. When I read chapter 17 and 18 together, to me it looks like it's talking about the same place, not 2 different entities at all. All right, so I want to point out a couple of things here in the 2 chapters. And what I want you to do is take a look at the highlighted text. And so right here we have, and the woman, this Mystery Babylon the Great, which thou sawest, is that great city. Okay. Now, you can't separate Mystery Babylon the Great from the city. It is that great city. Okay. Now, look at this highlighted text here that we have down here at the bottom. Alas, alas, that great city, Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. So, that judgment is going to be on the city. All right, that city. All right, let's go to the next slide here. And then look at verse 15, and it says, the merchants of these things, which were made rich by her, shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing and saying, alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, for in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught. And every shipmaster and all the company and ships and sailors and as many as trade by sea stood afar off and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, now listen, what city is like unto this city, this great city? And they cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, alas, alas, that great city wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness. That great city Babylon to be thrown down. All right. So the highlighted text here show again that Mystery Babylon the Great, that great city, is the one that had made these people rich. She's the one. The city is the one that did it. And so you cannot look at Rome as Mystery Babylon the Great because she's never had a commercial side to her. You can't divide this into 2 different entities, like chapter 17 is religious Babylon, chapter 18 is commercial Babylon, because this right here ties Mystery Babylon the Great directly to the commercialism in the city in which made all these people get rich by her. So my view is, based upon this right here, there is absolutely no way that Mystery Babylon the Great is the Roman Catholic Church. So the Roman Catholic Church has never been a commercial entity like is described in these two chapters. So anyway, it can't be her. So let's look at another thing that's offered up by people, the apostate church. A lot of people think that consider Mystery Babylon the Great to be an apostate church. So looking at this from the perspective of Revelation 17 and 18, it would have to be some kind of global church that has drifted so far away from the doctrines presented in the New Testament that the followers are deceived and are destined very possibly to hell because they've been deceived by her. And that's interesting. So that, I've got a problem with that fitting into this. So let's take a look at our prophetic profile here and see how she fits into that picture. It's difficult actually to find a church that would be considered apostate. Let me rephrase that. There are apostate churches out there, but one that is that well connected and that powerful and that well connected worldwide. And it's very difficult to kind of see one that is at that level in this world that interacts with the kings of the earth and all that kind of stuff. So when you look at this, she is very wealthy. An apostate church, I guess, would, if you even could find one that was that well connected and powerful, I guess be some wealth involved, but is it at the level that we're seeing here? I don't know. I don't think so. All right, so she mingles with the kings of the earth. I don't know that you can look at any apostate church that's that well connected and powerful that interacts with the kings of the earth. But the fact of the matter is, whatever it is that they're presenting to their congregations or followers and stuff, they don't really need the kings of the earth to be able to do that. And so you can't look at that as the wine that's making its way down to the inhabitants of the earth, so it's not really make all that much sense for an apostate church. She has a worldwide connection with all these kings and stuff. I don't know. I don't really see that. Global influence, the influence that she has over peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. Does she have that kind of influence? Is there an apostate church that is that powerful and well connected worldwide? It doesn't seem to fit. She could be identified by a single city, probably many cities, in a situation or within her and all that kind of stuff. We've said before, but identified by one single city, can't really say that either. And is she drunk with the blood of the saints? Well, some people will look, well, she's deceiving people. And that's how she's doing it. Now, it seems to be pretty clear that whoever Mystery Babylon the Great is literally drunk with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And that being the case, you just don't see the apostate church in that position. So when we look at this profile, none of that at all seems to fit the prophetic profile, not at all. And then when you look at even the other stuff about the commercialism and everything, it doesn't seem to fit as well. All right, another thing that is offered up is ancient Babylon reborn. There are those that consider that to be a possibility. It has the name Babylon, Mystery Babylon the Great, and so they look at, the ancient Babylonian Empire, which had a great city within it, Babylon, and they say, well, it's going to come back to power somehow. So I'm not going to say that can't happen, but there are a few points to consider, and here's one of them. If we are as close to the last Gentile world empire, which would be the Antichrist empire and the second coming of Jesus Christ, if we're as close to all of that as we think we are, okay, it's hard for me to believe that little place over there in Babylon and then the entire empire somehow coming together in such a short period of time, when the city itself is basically laying in ruins right now, other than the theme park that Saddam Hussein built that glorifies himself. But other than that, it's pretty much laying in ruins. So to think that it would be able to come together and to arise to world-class commercialism, political power, and all of that has been presented in chapter 17 and 18, to me now, it's a little iffy. It would literally take a political and commercial miracle for that to even take place. All right, so let's just go ahead and look at it from the thing here. So when we look at this, at this point, when you look at this right now, she don't fit any of that. She's laying in ruins over there, and that empire has not come together in any kind of power base at this time, so it doesn't fit anything. It would take, like I said, a literal political and commercial miracle in order for that to happen. However, I'm not going to say it couldn't happen, because we don't really know how long all this is going to take, but we believe anyway, that we're pretty close. So to think that as close as we are, that would somehow rise to world-class status doesn't seem likely to me. All right. So there is one other thing that I want to mention before we move on here, and that is, a lot of people think that Jerusalem is Mystery Babylon the Great, but when you begin to apply all of this to it, it absolutely doesn't fit. I don't know how wealthy Jerusalem is. It's probably doing pretty good. She mingles with the kings of the earth. Well, there may be some mingling with the kings of the earth, but to be honest with you, anytime they go to the United Nations, pretty much Israel is hated and condemned for every single thing that they do. And so they're hated. It's not like, she has any kind of political power or sway or anything else. And so you don't really see her having global influence in the sense that her culture and all that stuff going on with hers, making its way down to the inhabitants of the earth. Even in the commercial sense, you don't see any of that kind of stuff happen. She reigns over the kings of the earth. In this case, it would have to be some kind of military power. Now, let me say this, that Christianity definitely has a connection to Jerusalem and Judaism and all of that. And Christianity is a huge, very powerful thing that has happened as a result of Judaism and then the New Testament and all that. I mean, it's a huge thing. The implementation of Jesus Christ into this earth, dying on the cross and shedding his blood for the sins of mankind, and then being raised from the dead, is the greatest event that has ever happened in the world. And that's been 2,000 years ago. And the effect of that event is still felt even to this very day. And people that get saved or become born again at this very time still say, yes, he changed me. I became a born again believer, and I'm not the same person I used to be. You hear that all the time. You even hear it now, 2,000 years later. So think about the power of all of that. And so anyway, that's an incredible thing. Think about this. If every single soul that there is on the face of the earth right now would turn and repent and receive Jesus as their Savior. The song says there's power in the blood. All right, there is power in the blood, because there would be enough power in the blood of Jesus Christ that was shed that long ago to cleanse every single sin on the face of this earth right now, if everybody would just repent. But anyway, so that's just something for you to think about. So when you look at this, it doesn't fit any of this kind of stuff. So what I want to do now is, when you look at the things that we've looked at, you apply it to the prophetic profile that we presented to you, that we developed from the scriptures itself there. None of these fit. And so then, who is it? What if it's not a religious Babylon at all? You know, they're wanting to say, you know, religious Babylon chapter 17, commercial Babylon chapter 18, religious Babylon has power, and, you know, it's a religious power. What if it's not a religious Babylon at all? What if it don't have anything to do with that? What if it is a political Babylon that has commercial power too? What if that's the case? If we think of it as a political entity, it could regularly interact with the kings of the earth because, you know, they're all the time having all these summits and meetings and stuff around the world with all the leaders of the earth. And, you know, so from a political standpoint, it would definitely fit the picture. If this political Babylon also has a commercial power, it could have plenty to offer the kings of the earth that would make them rich. And plus the inhabitants of the earth would also be affected or made drunk by these commodities and this commercialism it is offering. For me, this idea fits the narrative that we have been talking about, and it is presented here in chapter 17 and 18. It fits it better. And the thing about it is, we don't have to wait on one to come. One may already be here. And more, let me say it this way, and more likely is, because if we're as close as we think we are, and this last Gentile world empire, which would be the Antichrist empire, is as close as we think it is, the mystery Babylon the Great has got to be up and running right now. And if it is, it will be destroyed by the last Gentile world empire. And then the last Gentile world empire will be able to have its date with destiny. Okay, so they have to both be close at the end of the age, without any question. Now, I'm going to put up this map of the world here. And let's just take a look at this map, and let me ask you a question. Do you see a country on this map that stands out? It's one that you could say is identified as a woman. And you think about it, a woman riding the beast. John saw a woman riding the beast. You know, so this nation identified as a woman could be identified by a city or one of her cities, interacts with the kings of the earth in a very powerful sense. In other words, she has a very powerful connection with the kings of the earth, maybe has a whole lot of say when they do have their meetings. And the reason I say that, all right, she's extremely wealthy. Extremely wealthy. So there's a nation up here that you can see that's extremely wealthy. Enough military strength to sustain its ability to reign or rule over the kings of the earth. She has military power in the sense that she has the ability to rule or reign over the kings of the earth. So whatever she has to say has a lot of clout. And she has a lot of power when she goes to these meetings with the kings of the earth and all that, and has a lot to offer them in the commercial sense. Enough commercial power to have the greatest commercial power. Think about that. Now, you got to think about this too. One that has global influence over all others. The best in entertainment, the best in business, the best in economy, the best in technology. You know, the pillars of society, you know, she is the best and has more to offer in all of these areas than anybody else at the present time. And so she's a pretty big kingpin here in this world, you know. She literally has an effect upon these pillars of society because she sits upon many waters, peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So keep this in mind too. Now, here's something you need to think about. She has fallen. Remember, it said that Babylon has fallen, has fallen. And so you need to think about that for a minute, because in order for her to have fallen, it means that sometimes she had to have some kind of place where she wasn't fallen, right? In other words, she had some kind of an acceptable position among the nations with God. Had to, because she fell. All right, so when she fell, obviously something happened there as far as God is concerned. She fell, all right? So she began to do some things and implement some things that he just didn't like. And that's pretty much a deal. And so God decided that she's going to be judged. Now, with this fall, there's something that happened. Do you see a nation that at one time had a favorable position with God among the nations, and then all of a sudden she fell, and no longer, you can see the things that she's doing and everything, that she no longer has a favorable position with God. Think about it. Now, this fall has also brought into the picture demonic activity. There is now a hatefulness that has settled over her. And the cage of every hateful bird, the foul spirits, these foul spirits, they have a hold upon her. So this favorable position that she had at one time, and now she has fallen, this are attributes that are beginning to manifest in her. And I believe as close as we are to everything that's happening right now. Do you see one that if it was neutralized, it would have an effect on the entire globe? Is there a nation up here that you see that if something were to happen to it, it would be a powerful event that would affect the entire globe? Yeah, there is one that does fit the criteria that we presented today. Okay, there is one. Now, I'm not saying this is the one, but it is very suspicious. She suspiciously fits all of the details presented, all except for one. There is one that's a problem. There is one that is a huge problem. Now, she fits all of this stuff over here. Just, I mean, wow, man, it's crazy. Identified as a woman, mingles with the kings of the earth, has all this commercial power, and that mingling with the kings of the earth and those connections that she has with the kings of the earth, produces this wine that makes its way down to the inhabitants of the earth. Think about it. All of that is very, very powerful stuff. And, this one definitely fits into that category. Has the greatest military. There's a lot of, all of these details anyway, she fits except one. Let's talk about that in a minute. All right, even though the U.S. fits every one of these characteristics, there is a huge gaping hole we need to discuss. She is not guilty of shedding of the blood of the saints. I used to completely dismiss the U.S. as a possibility because of this one point. In other words, decades ago, I heard people say that this was a possibility. The U.S. was Mr. Babylon the Great. And I would hear them say that, and I would say, yeah, but she's not guilty of shedding the blood of the saints. So it ain't her. Can't be her. And so I wouldn't even consider it as a possibility. And as I said before, I'm not the only one that originated this, man. This has actually been around for quite a while. It's becoming more and more popular now. But anyway, I'm not the only one that ever came up with this. So the only way I was even able to look at this as a possibility was to put this one thing about the shedding of the blood of the saints on a shelf and then look at all these other details. When I look at all the other details, I'm like, wow, man, that's pretty heavy duty stuff that she seems to fit. Anyway, others have made this claim, say that she is guilty of shedding the blood of the saints. She is guilty. So I'm going to have to stop right here for this session, okay? And we are going to, in part 5, we're going to see if the U.S. is in fact guilty of the shedding of the blood of the saints. Is it in her history? Perhaps she had global policies that were implemented that caused, some shedding of the blood of the saints. Or maybe it's future stuff. But in order for her to fit the profile that we have developed from Revelation chapter 17 and chapter 18, she will have to be guilty of the blood of the saints somewhere in order to fit the profile and be the one that is in question. So, what I'd like for you to do at this point is please remember to hit like, share, comment, and subscribe. Be very helpful to this ministry if you would be so kind as to do that. And I just want to thank you. My name is Don Sherrod, and this report is from Sherrod Ministries. Thanks for watching.